Okay, welcome back to introducing Bitcoin 1776 and the World Series of Bitcoin. Um, so far we've gone over an introduction to the system, an overview of the system, the economics of the system in a separate video, an introduction to the ascribed political election system, the purpose of the political election system, and a review of our cultural inspirations, are the quotes at the bottom of the page. Now, in this video, we'll start to go over the attack vector summary. I am not positive if I'll do this all in one video. It's quite long, but I will do my best to get as much as we can. So this is picking up onto page 5, which is where we kind of left off in the Bitcoin white paper previously. Okay, attack vector summary. Rewind attack. Problem. Newly created blocks can invalidate old blocks through abuse of code. Proposal. Alter code to make blocks permanent older than a certain period of time. Transaction fee spam. Transaction fee discounts for miners can drive up price for the public. Proposal. Alter code to reduce maximum rate of discount from 100% to 75%. Generalized disruption. Problem. Through a variety of techniques, users can become inconvenienced. Proposal. Improve the social collective and focus on primary objectives. Exchange rate volatility. Problem. Periods of high and low demand can significantly alter rate of exchange. Proposal. Systematically distribute and retract supply using a public table of values. Fear of responsibility, loss of discipline, societal isolation, and civil strife. Problem. Concentrated power and chaos can destroy and disperse a confederacy. Proposal. Encourage team building, small groups, and individual responsibility. Reduced scientific achievement, public interest, and youthful vigor. Problem. Decay is manifest without maintenance and renewal. Proposal. Systematically offer up shares of our stored value for these fresh starts. Financial control and manipulation. Problem. The future is uncertain, and one can come to control new distributions. Proposal. Reduce distributions and initiating coins to fewer than 5%. Propaganda, cartels, chastisement, and evaporation. Problem. Only orderly power corrupts, and corruption brings chaos and desolation. Proposal. Apply chaos and order in part and in turns to weed out corruption. Okay, so let's begin by taking these attack vectors from the top. I'll just go do these one at a time. Okay, attack vectors. Actually, let me go ahead and do a summary of these. This will probably be quite useful. So, the rewind attack and talking about making the blocks permanent, this is a suggestion, but not something that is going to be a goal of Bitcoin 1776. This is a suggestion to the public at large. Actually, yeah, okay, so I'm going to read this one part and then I'll go back to the summary, which is to say, okay. Generally speaking, attack vectors. Generally speaking, we hope that code development for Bitcoin 1776 does not materially differ from that of Bitcoin, and we hope Bitcoin groups work together. Thus, regarding attack vectors, they are largely the same for each. So, okay, so these attack vectors are just my personal observations of possible attacks to Bitcoin type systems, and these are weaknesses that I believe all systems face. So the rewind attack is where if you contribute a significant amount of hash power, you can rewind the Bitcoin blocks by creating a longer chain than the previously established longer chain. So in short, this means that for financial institutions, they might use a confirmation period of 6 blocks as sufficient confirmation to allow an any size of a transaction to go through. But this is not perfectly defensible because someone can pay an amount of money to acquire uh, production units to rewind the blocks more than 6 blocks by contributing more hash to create a new longer chain. And so, since this amount of money can be calculated and the amount of money transferred by the financial institutions, generically speaking, might be unlimited in nature, one can seek to defraud commerce through this method. However, this can be prevented, I believe, by instituting a checkpoint system, which simply is to prevent a node from accepting a blockchain that is longer than, let's say, 6 blocks different from the blockchain that they've been using previously, or 12 blocks different is my recommendation. 12 blocks different from the blockchain previously. And in the case of Bitcoin Gold in particular, their blockchain was rewound 25 blocks. Um, but I think that this can be permanently prevented from changing the code, um, which I go into at another time. Transaction fee spam, I've kind of covered this slightly in some other videos, but miners if 100% of the miners agree, then they can give themselves a 100% discount for on transaction fees, and then if they clog up a Bitcoin or similar blockchain with their own transaction fees, which they are getting a 100% refund upon, then this can hamper the use of the blockchain. So I suggest reducing this refund from up to 100% to a maximum of 75%, and then you can use that other 25% to fund other public goods that you might view necessary. And I believe that's possible. I'm not positive, but I believe that is possible to do, to code into the blockchain. Generalized disruption. So, this is to say, throughout time, what people feel the objective of Bitcoin is changes. Some people say the objective of Bitcoin is to destroy the banks. Some people say the objective of Bitcoin is to protect people from revolution and uncontrolled inflation in their home countries. Some people say it is to make it so that people can buy coffee and McDonald's Happy Meals at low fees. And some people say it is for to institute a new gold system or a new system of commerce, whichever. But the main way to counter this, I believe, is to focus on primary objectives, to kind of simplify what is the purpose of Bitcoin to something that everyone can agree upon. And if you do that regularly and try to not become too confused or convoluted in your objective, then if there is a disruption in one part, when it becomes necessary to reset the Bitcoin code to deal with this disruption, there is a base of unity upon a common objective that can align the guidance of the future peoples toward the right path. Exchange rate volatility. Um, this is this comes with a problem that gold and other commoditized assets face, but in particular gold faces a very similar volatility issue, which is that what people have noticed is that regularly during the holidays, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency products are social products. Their prices increase over a period of the holidays, Thanksgiving to Christmas, perhaps, and as students return to the houses to kind of guide their parents toward investing in Bitcoin, their parents or grandparents are then kind of forced, if they want to make a purchase immediately, they are forced into buying Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies at inflated values compared to what their traditional value has been. And so Bitcoin went up to like 20,000 bucks, and it's now around 7,000 bucks. Um, and so several people, families, have purchased Bitcoin at very high prices because they had a short time window upon which they could purchase the Bitcoin while their kids were there. Whereas bigger investors, they might purchase Bitcoin over years of time, and therefore they did not fall victim to the same at the same rate that families have fallen victim to the unstable value of Bitcoin in these commoditized products. So I propose a solution to this, which is a system of selling a large fixed supply at certain values to prevent excessive volatility. Fear of responsibility and just civil strife. Um, this is if you have too much federal power, federalized power, then it is easy to kind of disrupt a dispersed group of people, and likewise, if you if you kind of encourage the lack of virtue, or you could say anger, if you encourage anger toward people, or if you encourage people to isolate themselves, or if you get confused on what is your purpose, then all these things can destroy collective. Whereas Thomas Jefferson would say the people cannot be all and always so well informed, meaning that during the time of the American Revolution, the purpose was very well understood and united some portion of the population, not all by any means, maybe 30%, I don't know, of the population, but it was not all by any means. Um, but it united people, and then decades later, what is the purpose of America, or what is the purpose of the revolution, has changed and been manipulated or mutated to fit temporal concepts. So I suggest team building in small groups are the best way to defeat that kind of failure. And then reduced scientific achievement and youthful vigor. Um, this is something that occurs within a gold economy or an absolute economy. The Spartan race of men and women, which was a very successful individually group of people, but they simply what is largely said is that they bred themselves out of existence, even though they were very rarely defeated in battle or defeated by external enemies. Um, the uh, the the constitution of the Spartans, as one video puts it, the constitution of the Spartans was so rigid and so kind of restrictive or requiring of such sacrifice that that people just didn't want to have a ton of children, and immigrants didn't they weren't really welcomed into Spartan society very regularly, and therefore they sort of the Spartans kind of destroyed themselves by in effect condemning their youth through this very fixed structure. And gold economies can kind of work in a very similar way, which several people talk about in terms of the World War II strife that was caused by increased levels of industrial production. Were not the rewards of the industrial production were not passed on to the working force, and this is for a variety of reasons. Gold alone is not the sole reason of that, but also the primogeniture form of the economy that was I referenced in a previous video, which was common in the American Revolution. Both of these systems, the Spartan, the gold, the primogeniture system, all of these systems have a fixed, rigid mode of being, which is a very successful mode of being on on the individual or small collective basis, but it also becomes very challenging to breed a new generation of people to adopt this system. children are born without any gold. No child is born with a handful of gold. Maybe his father and mother have gold, but no child is born with gold, and therefore they are always at a disadvantage in a gold economy. Likewise with Spartan systems, and then also industrial production is not very much rewarded. Innovation is not really rewarded in gold economies. It is in some regard, but some people might say just hoarding gold is equally as rewarding as trying to risk innovation. So uh, the system here is to have some amount of social welfare to kind of encourage new starts or youth into the economy, a way to embrace youth into the economy. Now, what I recommend is a very minimal amount, uh, what I consider to be a very, very minimal amount. It didn't, and I don't think it takes much, personally speaking, but more could be better for sure. Um, the primary, if I was to describe the primary economics of Bitcoin 1776, it is very quite similar to a gold economy with some very, very small redistribution or repurpose of wealth to people who contribute, which is largely the youth or the workers of society. So the people who contribute, the groups who organize, and the thoughtful leaders. That is part of the redistribution, which separates Bitcoin 1776 from a strictly gold type of system. Okay. Financial control of manipulation. This deals with this is primarily dealing with foundations, overly large foundations, but it can also deal with Bitcoin itself, where there is 18% of Bitcoins, or maybe a little less at this point, of future Bitcoins to be distributed, which the vast majority of that is predicted at the current time, and the future is unknown. But the vast majority at the current time is predicted to go into the hands of Jaehan Wu and Bitmain. Um, and this can encourage Jaehan Wu or Bitmain to either acquire a large portion of the ownership of Bitcoin. He could easily have acquired 10 to 15% of the ownership of Bitcoin without making any purchase upon an exchange, simply through controlling the method of new distribution through his monopolistic practices and tendencies, with the assistance of national governments. So, and then foundations like the Ethereum Foundation or the IOTA Foundation or whatever, all these other foundations that are established, they can either sell large portions of their products and hurt prices, or they can withhold their sellings to artificially raise prices to sell subsequently. And quite often these foundations don't publicize when or how much they are selling or distributing, and this kind of can encourage the members of the foundation or the benefactors to pump up the price of the coin, because they receive just such a large portion of the benefit of the coin. So Bitcoin 1776 prevents this by of all future coins that are not directly proportioned to people in the Bitcoin who had previously bought Bitcoin as of July 4th, 2018, to less than 5% future issuance of coins. Therefore, the historic purchasers vastly, vastly outweigh all future distributions of the coin. So even if the foundation, which is kind of minimal in itself, even if the foundation was to try to pump up the coin, um, pumping the coin, 96% of that benefit goes into all the prior purchasers, which are outside of foundation control. Thus, they could sell and reduce the volatility of price in that manner. Okay, and lastly, propaganda, cartels, chastisement, and evaporation of evaporation, meaning loss of energy, which is to say, some people might say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Lord Acton is known for that, and I strongly advise reading his political writings. I think they're quite interesting, and in particular his history of human sacrifice. But moving on. Um, Nassim Taleb kind of references this in a very positive way as well, which is to say that nature in itself is chaotic, and to try to prevent chaos is to encourage cataclysm. Um, so absolute power can be referred to as order, and then absolute order creates uh, corrupts absolutely or creates cataclysm. One method to avoid absolute order and thus the cataclysm that comes from that is to divvy out chaos here and there. And so in the World Series of Bitcoin political system, it's a very ground up or bottom up political system, and therefore not everyone is really encouraged to submit to the same set of rules, even though there is a set of rules, but it's intentionally hoped to be kind of vague and easy to agree upon. And then also, the future of the Bitcoin 1776 political system is a little less stable than traditional democracies and republics. And so, therefore, since you kind of know the future is unstable, I think people would become wise uh, to try to create changes that subsequent people could agree to. So, anyways, this can be uh, in democracies. You tend to see propaganda dominate, which is in effect encouraging the uninformed voter to vote rather than to become informed. In republics, you tend to see cartels get developed where a small group of people manipulate the financial dealings. So, like committees in the U.S. government, there's all these little economic committees, or the Fed, or whatever, which can be well functioning, but they can also create an artificial hidden influence and direct the course of action despite the will of the electorate. Um, Chastisement. This happens when people of strong personalities, which all revolutionaries and people of strong independent minds, they all tend to have a strong individual personality that they push alone their efforts. Um, and you can quite often see where leaders such as Caesar or Napoleon or whatever, these people who brought about many great positive changes, when people review them in history, they will often denounce them as egotists and people who just wanted the best for themselves alone, when this is clearly contrary to the way that they live their lives. But it's very easy for the common man to sometimes you look for a little someone to blame quite often, and just blaming the individual of Caesar or Napoleon is like, oh, it's such a good idea to not try to do anything important in life. Um, that is wrong, but you will always be accused of being uh, what's anyways, a wild card, but that is just the nature of things. And then evaporation, just meaning the resistant to change or loss of energy, reduction of new ideas. Um, when you get all these things and kind of combine this absolute order, then there is no room for change within that. So that kind of goes over the summary of the attack vectors I describe in the Bitcoin 1776 white paper, and I'll now begin to discuss those individually. Thank you very much.